Hello, Ken Spriggs here with another short one video build of a 3D figure. This one is also from the Loki TV series, just like the Miss Minutes one was that I built in my last video. And this one I found on a Facebook group that I belong to, where a lot of creators offer their products for sale. And it's pretty cool. I've seen some really nice sculpts on there and figures and things of that nature. This particular one came from cults3d.com. I'll leave a link in the description. It's really reasonably priced. It was about $4. It's from someone in Europe, so it's in euros, but it came out to about, it's 3-something euros, so it came to about $4, give or take, in US. Really cool little figure. And what it is, and spoilers if you haven't seen it and you tend to see it, there is a variant version of the classic Loki in the TV series played by actor Richard Grant. And he has the really crappy classic green and yellow spandex outfit from the early 60s when he first came out, and the big gold horns, helmet and horns on his head. So it's pretty funny looking. And it's his glorious purpose. At one point in the episode, he shouts glorious purpose, and this is kind of reenacting that scene. So let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so I made a modification. This had a keyed part that went up into that chest part. It wasn't fitting at all, and I did a lot of sanding and a lot of modifying it, but I just couldn't get it to sit flush. And I think part of it was that the this base wasn't perfectly flat. So I just cut it off, sanded it, smoothed it out, and then I have some glue in there. I'm getting ready to just glue the two parts together. So it's easy enough to line up, and I don't really have to have a keyed part for it. So I think that'll work better on this. All right, so here are the rest of the parts for my classic Loki, or Glorious Purpose Loki. And as I showed, I went ahead and glued the chest, the top torso onto the bottom torso and the legs. And that's dried. So that's one piece. So we also have two arms. And it's pretty, as far as like the arms here, they're pretty smooth and plain, as you can see, but there is like a line between where the glove is, because his gloves are yellow. The rest of his tunic, like the arm part, is green, and same on the other one. There is a lot more detail on the body, which is accurate to the show. And then here is his head, really cool, with the classic big horns on his helmet. And he's giving that screaming look in his, as he's about to die from the big cloud monster. And I already cleaned these up, as you can see. And then his cape, which is really cool. It's nicely molded and shaped. Goes up. The whole body fits nicely up in there. There's that little bit of part at the top. I noticed that there are a couple of different yellows. Obviously his helmet is gold, it's shiny gold. You have like a goldish kind of yellow on his cape and his gloves and arms. A little bit different boots. Well, his boots and gloves are a little different, I think. I'll have to look at some pictures and see. Now the nice thing is it also comes with two versions of this. I guess it's supposed to be like magic energy or something. So here's the first one I printed, which I just did in the gray. Then I went ahead and printed some in clear, and I hollowed them out so I can light them up. So very cool. And they just go in his hands. So I'm just working on some ideas on how I can do that. I could have hollowed him out, but he's not very big, And it would have been tricky with these arms, especially with the bend in them. I wouldn't have got a very good channel going through it. So what I'm thinking of doing is drilling a hole through the palm that's going to be facing up, and then just channeling down through the arm up through here, and then just putting it back in again so you won't notice it. I could even just do that through the smooth part so I don't mess up the wrinkles, and then just do the same on both sides. And I could run the wires down behind him through the cape coming out like down here, and you wouldn't really even notice them into the base. They also made this base, I'm not real crazy about it. In fact, it broke in the middle and I had to glue it together again because it's such a very narrow little bit. So if it didn't have the place for his his feet to go in, I probably wouldn't even use it. But I think what I'm going to do is just beef this up some with some polymer clay and my rock mold that I've used before, and just make some extra rocks and just beef it up around it, maybe out of epoxy sculpt rather than polymer clay. But I have seen in the past you can bake this in the oven at a low temperature, it doesn't hurt it any. So we'll see. Actually, epoxy sculpt would be a lot more solid. I haven't done that before in my rubber rock mold, so we'll see. All right, so let me play with these a little bit more and see about how I can do the wiring. And once I get that hashed out, then I'll be ready to get the arms glued on to the body and start getting it painted. So here is his right arm that I channeled out as I showed in the previous stills, and ran a green chip SMD up through the palm of the hand. I just used some 5-minute epoxy to glue it in place right there on the palm through the hole. The hole goes through the palm at an angle. It comes out, as I showed in the pictures, I channeled it back through the back part of the arm where it's all smooth. Because it's going to be positioned like this, you're not going to see it. But I still wanted to be able to make it smooth again. So then I took some CA glue and glued the wire down into the channel, and you can see it coming out the back. And I used some Instaset CA kicker to harden it in place. Cleaned it off, and then I'm just using some Bondo spot putty to smooth it out. I like the spot putty because it hardens in just a few hours. You can sand it down very smooth because it's made for working on car bodies, and you can get the really nice smooth finish off of it, and it dries pretty hard too. So I'll let that set up, and then I'll sand it down, smooth it out, and that'll be one of the arms completed. And so do the other one, and then I'll be ready to start putting him together, and then start getting him painted. All right, so I went ahead and sanded down the Bondo. Got a nice smooth finish on it. And again, that's going to be sitting up like this, so you're not going to see that close up anyway. But it still is smoother and back where it needs to be again. And I have the wire coming out the back. So this way I can just glue the arm into the chest, the upper torso, have the wire coming through the back, and the same on the right side, left side, well, my right, but the left arm. And then I can wire those two together and take it down behind the figure. And I'm thinking take it just down behind the left leg. I'm not going to channel anything more there, but when it's in that cape, you're not going to see it anyway. So, all right, we go ahead and work on the left arm, and then we'll start getting this together. All right, and there's a little test. It is getting washed out by the camera. It actually is very green. Let me see if I can get closer. Just the light, come on. It's kind of that color green, even though it's out of focus. But yeah, that's going to work just fine to be able to light up that green magic in his hands. All right, and there's a test to make sure that they're still lighting up. Just holding your battery together. Very cool. And they're pretty dim right now. That's why the green is looking correctly the right shade of green and not being washed out. Arms are all glued together, so I'm going to go ahead and cover up those lights. Well, first I want to attach a wire to the back of this to make one wire coming down by his leg. Then I'm going to go ahead and get him primed. And then we'll be ready to start doing some painting. All right, so I just kind of mocked him up on his base, put him inside the cape, and put his head on. So you can see the wires are nicely hidden. And they come out down, that you can see down the bottom there. They're going to come out behind him from his leg into the base. So I'm going to modify the base to be able to hold a battery. I'm probably going to use a 2 AAA battery holder, which is fairly small, but I'm definitely gonna have to beef up that base quite a lot. So, all right, so pretty awesome. These are kind of dim right now because I'm just using a coin battery, and also because I don't have the clear, whatever that is, magic over top of it. So, all right, but looking pretty fantastic. So let me take the head and the cape back off, and I'm ready to start doing some priming. I got a coat of primer on my Loki figure. Now his head is not glued on. I just stuck it in there in order to make it easier to put some primer on. And I got a coating of primer on both sides of his cape. I didn't show it, but I used this UV activated liquid plastic adhesive. You can get it in from different brands. I got this from Amazon a couple of years ago, actually. I don't use it very often because I don't think it's that strong for the most part. It is clear and it hardens quickly, so it's nice for certain things. But since I'm only tacking on the wiring in the back, that's the only thing I used it for. So you can see those little, no, it's painted over, so you can see the little dabs of it there. It was easy to be able to just glue the wiring down around his back leg. Like I said, I didn't channel anything out because all of that will be hidden by his cape that I showed previously. So he is all primered and ready to go. I have the lights taped off so that they're not going to be affected. So I'm ready to go ahead and start putting down some paint. Now, I'm still going to paint the head separately from the rest of the body since it is a separate piece. And but it will have some similar colors. Well, actually, it's going to be a little different because his face is flesh, of course. His helmet and his horns are some form of gold, which I think I'm going to do an outclad on. And then this little head cloth under the helmet is also yellow, so that's going to match the parts on his body. I have to do look at some stills because I know that there are some different colors of the yellow, like that sash around him and that chest part. Certainly his gloves and his boots are going to be some form of yellow. His pants, his underpants. I love how they made this look really tacky and crappy looking, which it does. I mean, the original outfit shown in the 60s was pretty outrageous. A lot of them were. But it's funny how they had Richard E. Grant wearing this really crappy looking costume, but it's hilarious. That's why I like this figure. And then the rest of it, the main part of his tunic is a green, and like his main legs are green. So I have to figure out what colors to use of those, and then kind of go from there. So I will start to do some painting, and then we'll get this figure painted up. Then I have to figure out what I'm going to do about the base in order to have a battery down there and power his magic. So fantastic. So I started painting the figure. I got some flesh onto his face at first, and then I put a little bit of sand on it to lighten it up a little bit. And then I took some yellow and I just painted around the part underneath his helmet. There's a few little tiny parts in the front that I have to touch up a bit. So I'll let that sit for now. I started by trying to put some green on. I wasn't crazy about it. So I started with yellow because it's more of a yellow tone in the green. And then once I put the yellow on, I put some dark green over top of it. Get off there. This is some silly putty, which I used to keep the parts yellow that I wanted to, like the part at the top of his outfit, his little underpants that are right there. So they'll stay yellow. And so I'm gonna let that dry, and then I still have to paint his boots, his gloves, and then that part on his chest, which those are all going to be the same color. There's some other parts underneath this tape when I take it off as well that I have to paint. So I'm starting work on beefing up the base and making an area where I can put this AAA battery holder, 2 AAA batteries underneath it, because it's nice and small. But I want the brightness, even though these batteries are still 3 volts and the coin batteries are 3 volts, the AAA and the AA batteries have more amps. They put more power through. So you're going to get brighter SMDs, and they're going to last longer. So I try to shy away from using coin batteries unless I really have to, and they're just lighting up some little teeny light that doesn't have to have a lot of brightness. But these ones I want to glow pretty bright to make that translucent resin magic really glow. So here's the piece, as I said, that they give you for the figure, 3D printed. So very flimsy in the middle and kind of small, but it has some nice holes where his feet are going to go. So I'm going to use this piece of thick foam, and I'm going to first of all figure out where I can put this so it will be somewhere in the back, and then I can just wire the wires to it that come down by his left leg, and then it'll be underneath, and then I'll just have the switch underneath so I can just turn it on from underneath that way. And then from there I can figure out what I can do to beef this up using a combination of some rocks that I'm going to make and some other scenic materials. So all right, so let's go ahead and get cutting on this. All right, so I'm working on the base. I cut the piece of foam and I glued on the resin 3D printed piece. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking some epoxy sculpt, 2-part epoxy sculpt, and I'm putting it in this rock mold from Scenic Design. I forget what it's called, but the brand that makes it, but in making some rocks and then sticking them on here to make the whole thing look like it's a big rocky base, because it's self-hardening. So that's a pretty cool idea. I've used this before with some polymer clay and other things, as I've shown, but it picks up some nice detail for the rocks. And I'm just like piecing some different ones around it and filling in the whole base. So, all right, coming together pretty good. Work progresses on my base for my classic Loki. I got a lot more epoxy sculpt around the front part. Most of the front's completed now. Well, all the front's completed now with some different rock shapes on it. I put a little piece over here, which is supposed to be like a stone column or a piece of a column or some kind of a building part that's just kind of sitting in there, so I can add something a little man-made into it, since this the area where they are in the show has a lot of destroyed buildings and wrecked structures and things like that. So just add a little bit of character to it. I glued a piece of thin foam on the back to seal up that back part where the battery compartment is, and to give me something solid to finish up the rest of this, so I don't just have a flat edge. I can just round that out a bit and just fill in some little pieces like this. And once I get it all painted, it's going to look pretty cool, like different sections of rock, different colors, and put a wash in it, that sort of thing. So, all right, so I've been working on this a few hours, not straight. I did some parts earlier and just kind of let it set up a bit. So these parts are already hardened. The other ones are pretty close to doing so. It only takes a few hours to set up. I'm not going to do anything on the bottom. There's no need for that. So I'll finish up the back here, let that fully harden, set up overnight, and then I'll be ready to get some primer on it and then start painting the rocks, and that'll pretty much finish the base. I will at some point have to drill a hole down through into this area. Since it's coming down by this foot, I can just drill a hole right down behind this. And I can even drill through the epoxy sculpt. It's drillable, as well as this 3D printed resin. So I'll just drill a hole straight down for the wires from his legs to go down, meet that up with the battery and the switch, and that'll power his magic. So coming along fantastically. I finished the epoxy sculpt on the base last night, let it sit overnight, and it's all hardened up. So I took a pin vise, I put him in position, and I drilled a hole down through the back and ran the wires down just to see where those would come out. And there's a little hole right there. And those are going to be nicely hidden. They're going to be right there behind his foot. He's going to have his cape on. There might be a tiny bit that will be visible underneath the cape, but I can paint that to match the rocks once I get that all painted. So let me go ahead and take him off of here, get a coat of primer on the base, and then I'll be ready to start putting some different washes and rock colors onto it to paint it. I still have to mask off and paint his boots, his gloves, and these little sections here, like this chest part, which is a little bit different yellow. I'm really going to use the same yellow with a little bit of gold in it to do all of these parts. His underwear are going to stay the same. I have to look at some stills again to see what color these little bits sticking out are, but this band across his waist and this part here are going to be that more goldish kind of a yellow. And then I still got to paint up his head and his cape, but definitely coming along and looking pretty awesome. A little bit of touch up right down here, a bit of overspray as well. So. All right, so quite a lot more painting, masking and painting. I finished all the main colors on his body. So as you saw, I taped off that sash there on his chest and the one around his waist, also his gloves and his boots. Now a lot of these yellows are very subtly different, but there is a bit of a difference. Let's see if I can get in close. So you can see, first of all, there's a bit of a metallic sparkliness to that, as opposed to just a plain yellow on that top piece, because I added in some gold leaf into some yellow to try to make it a bit of a different color. And then and the same with his boots, because they kind of look that way. They look like they're a little bit of a different sort of a yellow. So his body's all done. I did a little bit of touching up. I might have to do just a little bit more. I also painted the cape. Now for the cape, I used a green yellow, which I think is a lot closer to the images that I saw on screen of his cape. It's a little bit darker. And also that collar around there. But I kept this top piece yellow to match the top of his outfit there in yellow as well. Okay, so the cape's all completed. And then I did the metallic helmet of him. I first did an outclad, so I used their gloss black and let that dry. Put down some pale gold. But then in the show, it's really worn and has a lot of patina, and it's really dirty and that kind of thing. So I went back over it. I lowered my airbrush pressure down to about 15 psi. And then I went over it first with some dark iron and just really let it sputter. You can see some little specks and just some darkened places, and went over that very lightly in several places. Then I was going to use copper, but I didn't have any, so I used some metallic brown, which looks very much like copper, and went over it with that as well. So I think that looks rather dirty and worn. I can still do some other weathering and on the rest of his outfit once I get him all together. So I still have to finish painting his face, his mouth and his teeth and his eyes, and maybe just do a little bit of flesh speckling on his skin as well. But just about done with all the painting and getting ready to get him put together. And like I said, I can still do a lot more weathering once he's all together. And even when he's on the base, it's not going to be a problem. So, but definitely getting close to wrapping up this figure. So after I primed the base that I made, I went over it with some flat black, just some Krylon spray can flat black. Let that dry. Then I airbrushed over some sky gray and some light gray, a little bit of dark gray, just to kind of give it some different shades. It's not done yet. I still want to do some washes and things like that, but I want to get the general rock look. So I'm ready to go ahead and start doing some other things as far as some scenic materials, such as this grass part over here, some other things like that I'm gonna just beef it up a little bit. I'm not gonna go too crazy. So I attached the Aaa battery holder underneath. I hot glued it in place, and I hot glued the switch right there, so that's easy to reach. I can just click that to turn it on. The wires I just have taped in for now. So you can see that hole right there. That's where the wires are going to come down from the top. So once I get the figure attached on, I'll just bring the wires down, attach them to these two, glue those in place as well, probably with some hot glue, just so that they stay. And then it'll all be one piece. And I can remove the batteries easily from underneath there and put them back in. I've used that process before, so. I probably will do some washes as well, and maybe some weathering powders, that sort of thing, just to kind of make this look like a barren sort of a ground section that he's standing on. So, all right. So I started weathering the base. I initially started with some Abtelung 502 oils, put some different shades and colors onto it. I tried to keep this part here a little lighter than the rest and then do some different shading around it. And then once I applied the different shades and let it start to dry, I went back and put over some weathering powders. I like to do weathering powders over top of the oils. First of all, it dulls down the shine and it makes it look more realistic with a powdery kind of a look on it. And then plus you can add additional colors. So I use some grubby green, dusty brown, some ash gray. I'll let that set up a bit and dry, and then I'll come back to it. I wanted to get some green tones for sure, so I used some green oils for sure in the grubby green. That'll play off of the greens and the yellows in his outfit. And also the glowing green, of course, from his magic energy. So I'll let that set up, and then I'm going to add a little bit of like scenic foliage, like this green moss right here, or lichen, and these other things, just little bits of, to give it like a look of moss, that sort of thing. He's in basically a field, so it would be reasonable that it was just rock and dirt and moss and that kind of thing. So we're coming along really well. And here is my finished Loki. In his face, I did do his eyes a couple of times because they just weren't looking right to me. His facial features are close to the character, to Richard Grant, but not exact, so it's hard to get that look of him. And his eyes are pretty tiny. I decided to go ahead and paint the magic effects with some clear green. Let those dry, and I glued them onto his hands. So he's all ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and get him on his base and get him wired down. A few more things I have to do on that, but I can do that after he's on. It'll be easier to work with since I'm going to be having to move that around while I get him attached. So, all right, looking pretty cool. And here is my completed classic Loki with his glorious purpose, looking pretty glorious with his glowing magic effect. It looks a lot deeper green in person than it does on the camera, but it looks cool on the camera too. I'm glad I painted those with the clear green to me, because I think it deepens it, makes it look a little more even lighting. I completed the base, adding on some green lichen and some other scenic materials that I got from, I usually get from Hobby Lobby, or I also got from a hobby store nearby, just some railroad material. You can see the different greens in there around the rock. I think that really adds some character to it and kind of plays off the greens in his outfit as well. So I think he turned out pretty fantastically. I'm really happy with that. It's a really cool figure. The likeness to Richard Grant is not that great, but he looks pretty cool. And he certainly looks the part of the classic Loki in his green and yellow spandex. All right, so looking pretty fantastic. Really happy with that, and glad that build turned out really nice. All right, fantastic. All right, so very happy with how that figure turned out, especially with the lighting for his green magic. So really happy with that. Also, like I said, it's a little more complex than my last one. So slowly I'm kind of getting back into my modeling mojo and adding on some additional complexities to these, and just starting to enjoy it again and getting back into the flow of things. So, all right, well, thank you to all my new subscribers. Stay tuned, and I will continue working on existing models that I've been working on, and possibly some new things too. So I will see you next time.